Oregon football goes back into the transfer portal, and they add Chase Cota, an Oregon native from UCLA, whose final year of eligibility will be played up in Eugene in the green and yellow, coming from the baby blue and gold. All things Chase Cota and Oregon football today on Locked On Ducks. Here we go.
You are Locked On Ducks, your daily podcast on the Oregon Ducks, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Yes, it is that time once again for Locked On Ducks, or if you're watching on YouTube, it is that time for the very first time here on this wonderful platform for Locked On Ducks. I'm your host, Spencer McLaughlin, D1 play-by-play broadcaster and lifelong Oregon Ducks fan. Thank you for making this your first listen or your first view, perhaps every day. It's part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your number one source to stay up to date with the Ducks every single weekday. Today's episode is brought to you by BetOnline. BetOnline has you covered this season. More props, odds, and lines than ever before. BetOnline, where the game starts. If you have not already, like and subscribe wherever you're listening to this, or if you're watching on YouTube, like and subscribe to the channel. You can comment below if you want a question answered here on the show, or tweet with the hashtag AskLODPod. Hit me up on Twitter at Smalls_55 or at Locked On Ducks, both DMs wide open. You can get up there, ask me a question. I'll answer it for you right here on the show. You can ask me anything. I mean, preferably something about the Ducks because that's the nature of the show. But if you want to ask me something else, by all means, get up there and fire away. I'm not exactly a private person who's not going to tell you anything. So I have to start today's show with something of grand importance that I saw the other day on Twitter, and I felt it was worth addressing. It is Girl Scout cookie season, and Thin Mints are the best cookie. There's no argument here. I will not hear debates or arguments otherwise. I like them all. I will eat literally anything. But if you don't think Thin Mints are the best, if you're a Duck fan, you don't think Thin Mints are the best, just consider this. You're rejecting the green box and you're choosing other colors. Just think about that if you don't think Thin Mints are the best cookie. Saw that. I thought it was very worthy to talk about here on the show. I mean, this is all things Ducks, and that's green, so it's close enough. Also, Oregon basketball, the men and the women were that close to greatness. I feel like Director Krennic in Rogue One. We were this close to greatness over the weekend. Couldn't get it done. I'm still processing the general misery, frustration, disappointment, all those sorts of emotions. That'll probably be addressed on tomorrow's pod. But today, the big news for Oregon football, Chase Cota is an Oregon Duck. And I've wanted this move to happen for a long time. It seemed logical for a number of reasons. And one of the reasons that it felt right is that his dad, Chad Cota, played for the Ducks, I believe back in the 1990s. And even back then, Oregon was wearing some slamming uniforms. They were awesome. I think against Washington in Marcus's, I think sophomore year, maybe junior year, we wore some throwbacks from that era. Whew, boy, I am a fan. But Chase Cota comes to the Ducks, and by the way, Chad Cota, the uncle of Brady Breeze, also an Oregon Duck. So again, this is just kind of keeping things in the family, feels right. And Chase Cota, I think, is a really good fit for Oregon. And he might have actually come to the Ducks when he graduated high school in 2018 if Taggart hadn't left for Florida State, because he was, being very heavily recruited by the Ducks. Of course, he comes from South Medford High School, 6'3", 205, 4.53 in the 40-yard dash, has the physical tools. He's been, fairly productive at UCLA, but I'll get to why his numbers maybe haven't quite hit their ceiling in that department just yet, but he could very well do that when he comes up to Eugene and plays for the Ducks. But Oregon wanted him pretty bad. And there was this awesome recruiting graphic I saw where the Ducks had put it together. This was the previous staff because he was class of 2018. And they'd put together, Chase Cota, and the O in Cota was, of course, the O in Oregon. And he was wearing, he had been photoshopped into the Once a Duck uniforms, which, speaking of great outfits, Once a Duck with the orange socks, the white pants, green awesome. So unbelievably good for a number of reasons. And On the other side was his dad, Chad Cota, in that classic uniform that I alluded to earlier. So I think that was fantastic. It's just a cool thing to look at. If you haven't seen it, it's really worth looking at. But it goes to show you that Oregon was going after this guy pretty hard, and there's a reason. They weren't the only school that was interested in him. There were Alabama's and Georgia's and UCLA, USC, a lot of schools that wanted Chase Cota. He ended up going to UCLA to play for Chip Kelly. So he comes into this Oregon wide receiver room. And what do we know about the Oregon wide receiver room right now? We know that there's talent there. There's some pretty highly rated recruits. Dante Thornton, a 4-star, Hudson, a 4-star, Troy Franklin, a 4-star as well. Isaiah Brevard, another guy who, in theory should be able to pop and be productive on the perimeter. They're just pretty unproven. I mean, they're just very unproven when you look at the number of games they've played and catches they have. It's not really a huge number. Hudson is the leading receiver coming back, and even he was, kind of a wide receiver 2 or 3 this past season with the Ducks when you had Devin Williams and Johnny Johnson there. Those were probably the top 2 guys. So Chase Cota brings something to the wide receiver room that I think the Ducks need, and that's experience. I mean, you're losing Jalen Redd, Johnny Johnson III, Devin Williams to the NFL, Micah Pittman to the transfer portal, all these guys. That's just a lot to lose for one unit. So there isn't much experience there. He brings a veteran presence to a young and I think very talented wide receiver room, which is a good thing for a couple of reasons. I'll tell you why after I tell you that it's the time of year that I've pretty much, given up on all my New Year's resolutions, which is pretty typical. But not this year. I'm sticking to my resolution to eat right thanks to Built Bar. Almost feels like it's not really a resolution because I actually enjoy eating them. If you haven't tried the Puffs, you're missing out on one of the best tasting Built Bars. Puffs are a fan favorite with some incredible flavors. Yummy cinnamony churro. I didn't write it. Coconut marshmallow, banana cream pie. I didn't write it, but it sounds good, doesn't it? I love cinnamon. Best spice in the world, bar none. All Built Bars, including Puffs, are covered in 100% real chocolate, 130 calories, 4 grams of sugar, 4 net carbs, 17 grams of protein. That's a big one. Any of you golfers out there, I highly recommend it for your mid-snack round on the golf course. Go to built.com, use promo code LOCK15, get 15% off your order. Use promo code LOCK15 for 15% off at built.com. All right, so Chase Cota brings a few things to the Oregon wide receiver, not just a chance to be productive, but an opportunity. And I don't know him or know anyone that knows him personally, but he has an opportunity to be a real leader in that room, to be a guy who teaches the young guys who are just going to be learning how to become volume receivers. How do you run routes? How do you work out? How do you do all these things in order to succeed in the Pac-12 and at the Division I college level writ large? Because Chase Cota knows how to do that. And I think he comes in not just as a guy who has a chance to start right away, but a chance to really, leave an impact in the coming years. Because if you talk to anyone who played in really any sport, everybody's got a mentor, right? And they've had those guys who they've looked up to and have said, man, yeah, he had such a big impact in my career and he showed me the ropes and all this sort of stuff. I think that's something Chase Cota has the potential to do. Whether or not he'll be able to, I have absolutely no idea. But the possibility is certainly there. And a guy who has played 4 years of college football successfully in the Pac-12 and knows how to make plays, that's a pretty good candidate to be able to do that. Now, this past season at UCLA with Chip Kelly, who, as we know, is a good offensive mind. Dude knows how to score points. Needs a good defensive coordinator, as we also know. Nick Aliotti, kind of the silent savior of that magical run that the Ducks had. But Chip Kelly knows how to coach offensive players. So when you look at the numbers for Chase Cota, 18 catches, 286 yards, and 1 touchdown this past year, you might look and say, boy, that's really underwhelming. And it sort of is for a guy of Chase Cota's caliber who had offers from SEC schools, including Alabama, and USC had offered him. Oregon wanted him. There were a lot of places, Georgia, Notre Dame. He had a lot of big-time schools who were interested in him for a reason. He was a 4-star recruit out of South Medford High School. And I just don't think you should focus in on the stats too much because those schools were interested in him for a reason. And it's because when you watch the tape and watch him play, he's a good route runner. He has good speed, good physical tools. He has really soft hands. But I think what I love most about him is his physicality. I mean, when you watch this guy play, he catches the ball and wants to be able to make a play in space. He's not a fly sweep guy. That was never his role at UCLA. They had other players, Kaz Allen and Kyle Phillips, who did that sort of stuff. But Chase Cota is a receiver who primarily is working the middle of the field. That's what he is really good at. I think that if he were to be given a role where he had to catch some outside balls like Devin Williams did this past year for the Ducks, those back shoulder fades or the whatever number of deep balls were actually thrown this past year. I think he's more than capable of securing those sorts of catches and making those sorts of plays. But if you get him in space, he's out there head hunting in the secondary, and I love it. I am all about it because he is tough, he is physical, and he is not afraid to use his size. And sometimes, when guys go from high school to the college ranks, they realize, boy, this isn't the same. I can't just run people over. I can't just, use my physical gifts in order to make space. But Chase Cota is still big enough to the point where he's able to be that sort of player at the second level. So I'll be interested to see how he gets utilized within the offense. I mean, I'm interested to see how anyone is utilized in this offense because Kenny Dillingham hasn't really called plays much in the past. So we don't know exactly what to expect from the offense this year, but this is another weapon, a guy who could really anchor a young and unproven wide receiver unit. Talented, but you just don't know how they will hold up over the course of, 12, 13, 14 games when these guys have to, make 5, 6 catches a game or make a catch in a big spot. And, I think that I think Chris Hudson came along big time, made some big catches, especially against the Beavs. He had some huge catches on third down in that game. There was one in particular, I think it was a one possession game, 1 or 2, and it was a 3rd and 8. And if we'd had to punt, I was going to be feeling really, really bad. And Hudson came up, caught a strike from Anthony Brown over the middle, big time catch. He made a number of those plays in that football game. Chase Cota is another guy who's going to be reliable like that. And Anthony Brown a season ago kind of had, Devin Williams as his number 1 and Hudson as his number 2. I think you're going to have, Cota over here and Hudson over here as the kind of safety valves, reliable targets who are going to be open more often than not when you look at this wide receiver unit. And I think that he's going to play. I really do. I don't see how a guy who has played 4 years of college football successfully, has got all the physical tools and the experience and everything, is going to be able to come into this Oregon room and just not be able to find the field. You might say, well, his stats are just not that impressive. He doesn't have a, true breakout season, but I don't think he ever really hit his ceiling at UCLA because he was behind Kyle Phillips and Greg Dulcich in terms of targets on that team. Those were DTR's top 2 guys. If you watch UCLA over this past year, Kyle Phillips, who's really good, by the way, Greg Dulcich, NFL caliber tight end. Chase Cota kind of got lost in the mix between those two on a team that didn't throw the ball a whole lot. They ran the ball a lot, so did Oregon. But the difference is that UCLA was very explosive in their passing game, whereas Oregon was a little more dink and dunk, as we know. And they ran the ball very effectively. They used play action very well, and Chase Cota was a part of that. But he was not the number 1 guy. He was the number 3 guy. And I think the stats kind of reflected that with regards to the volume of targets and receptions and touchdowns and such, because he just wasn't going to be able to get those sorts of looks because Chip wants to run the ball first, and he had a couple good running backs, and DTR can run the ball, and they had a good offensive line. So Chase Cota, I think, got lost in the shuffle, and I think he could really pop. I do. I think that, he's got the physical tools, the experience, and the skill. He knows how to play in this league, in the Pac-12. He's done so for the past few years. So I see no reason why he wouldn't be able to come to Oregon and honestly be the number 1 wide receiver. I mean, that position itself, kind of wide receiver 1, as they call it, is wide open. There is no clear wide receiver 1. Hudson, probably the leading candidate. Now I would argue it's Chase Cota because he has proven that he can sustain success over several years as a wide receiver in the Pac-12. And Chris Hudson, though I like him a lot, hasn't shown that yet. He perhaps has the ability to become the number 1. But I think if Cota and Hudson are your top 2 wide receivers, generally speaking, you're in pretty good shape. But I had this thought as well about the potential of what it would look like if he doesn't end up having a high impact. And I'll tell you exactly what that is and why it could actually be a good thing if that does end up happening, though I don't believe it will, after I tell you that football might be over for the season, but basketball is in full steam for both pro and college hoops. From all the latest odds, totals, player performance props to where the next fired coach is going to land. You talk about electric futures bets. BetOnline.net is the number one spot for all your sports betting needs. BetOnline remains the best spot for all your sports scores, podcasts, and news this season. It's not just basketball. BetOnline.net is your source for hockey, boxing, UFC odds, right to the Olympic coverage and information. Head to the website today. Use your mobile device to learn more about the trends and action. BetOnline, where the game starts. So, if Chase Cota ends up being a relatively low impact transfer, that'd be a pretty remarkable sign for the Ducks, because what that would mean if after the 2022 football season, which is the final year of eligibility for Chase Cota, he's got one left. He played all four at UCLA, didn't redshirt, so can't do any of that. And this is, his free fifth year of eligibility. If he ends up not playing a lot and we look back after the season and say, boy, he really didn't do a lot, and it sounded like he was going to have a really big impact, but he just kind of didn't, and it wasn't that much of a high impact player. That wouldn't be a bad thing at all, because remember, there's a lot of other 4-star receivers in the room, and if Chase Cota ends up not doing much for the Ducks, one of two things have happened. One is good, one is bad. We'll start with the bad. The bad would be a semi-repeat of what we saw this last year, which is wide receivers are just grossly underutilized in the offense. They're not involved in a major way, and he just doesn't get a lot of targets and touches because Bo Nix or whoever is playing quarterback, maybe Ty Thompson, maybe Jay Butterfield, you just never know. The quarterback's not able to get him the ball. That'd be the bad scenario. The good scenario would be he doesn't have an impact because Thornton is a 1,000-yard receiver and Hudson is 700 yards, and then we have 500 yards from one of Brevard or Troy Franklin, those guys like that. That's not a bad thing either, because those are the young guys who are the future of this position for the Ducks. And I think that when you look at that room, one or two of those guys has to pop. I think Hudson is for sure going to be a staple for Oregon wide receivers for the next several years, which is a great thing for Ducks fans. But between Franklin and Brevard or Crocker or Thornton, all these guys who are at that position, they're 4-star recruits, just like Chase Cota. A lot of them are. And so if Chase Cota ends up being the number 4 wide receiver this year, first of all, that's a heck of a number 4 wide receiver, let me tell you, especially in the Pac-12. But that would mean that the other guys are coming into their own, settling in and showcasing their talent and full potential and coming close to hitting their ceilings as young players for Oregon and the staff. So I think that is unlikely, but not impossible. And if that ends up being the case, well, then that ends up being the case, because remember, Darren Thomas transferred because Marcus Mariota was behind him. So if Chase Cota ends up, transferring midseason or something, or not playing a whole lot, that's because the guys in front of him are really, really good. And I'll close today talking about Chase Cota with this. It's going to be fun and nostalgic for me, and I'm sure for many of you Duck fans as well, to see, assuming he keeps the same number, the number 23 on the back of a wide receiver jersey. I presume that's what he's going to wear. And by the way, Seven McGee will wear number 7. Julio Florence going to wear number 6. Numbers are a big deal. They just are. Go to any football team, any locker room. Guys want their numbers for a reason. If you played sports, you know why. It matters. It just does, because you can't explain it, but you can't explain everything that happens in sports. A lot of superstition, a lot of, it's just one of those things. So if he's wearing number 23, I will just be getting mad throwbacks to Jeff Mail. They actually have kind of similar hair too. They have kind of similar frames. Now, is Chase Cota as good at this point in his career as Jeff Mail was then? We haven't seen that. And I think I will die on this hill forever. I think Jeff Mail is one of the best Oregon wide receivers I've seen come through the program in the all right, I'm not that old, in the 15 years or so that I've been following the Ducks. He was an elite route runner. He had phenomenal hands. He was a great blocker as well. And that's a way that Cota can come in and set the tone. You have to be willing to block if you're going to run the ball to the outside, which I hope Oregon's going to be able to do, and I think they're going to be able to do. Bo Nix is a fast quarterback, and you have guys like Seven McGee, Byron Cardwell with speed to get to the edge, Sean Dollars as well. If you're going to run on the edge, your wide receivers have to be willing and able to block. And if Chase Cota can come in, set the tone, and let the young guys know, yeah, route running, pass catching, all that stuff, that's a big part of the position. But we have to be willing to block as a unit as well. Cota's a physical guy. You watch him when he carries the ball, like I was saying earlier, he's out there headhunting. He wants to run people over, run through them, not around them. And I think that could bode well for his capabilities as a blocker. I haven't watched, or been able to find film really of him as a blocker, but my instinct would be he's probably going to be pretty good at that. And that's an important part of the offense. Every wide receiver has got to be able to do that. And just in pads, honestly, he'll look like Jeff Mail. He just will. Number 23, kind of curly flow coming out of the helmet, just a little bit. I think Cota's a little bit thicker. Mail was a little bit skinnier, but I think Jeff Mail probably had a little bit better speed. Maybe was a touch better on the route running, but I think that'll be a really fun thing. So full thoughts today on Chase Cota. I appreciate everyone listening. For those of you watching, have a wonderful rest of your day and go Ducks.